Welcome to The Spur and your interview about your business, Daphne. I'm so happy to have you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So I'm going to start with, we're so lucky to live and work in the Hamptons, and I'm curious how you and your family got here.
Love brought me here. My husband has lived out here for over 20 years, and I met him on a lark at a party that I attended in East Hampton. And I was lucky enough to be working remotely for a company, even though I was living in New York City at the time. And so the move out here was pretty seamless for me. And that was before we had children, before we got married, and over a decade ago.
So how old are your children?
My children are 7 and 9, and they're 2 girls, Zoe and Maya. And
Great.
They're living a good life out here.
And what town do you live in out here?
I live in Sag Harbor.
Okay. And what school do they go to?
Sag Harbor Elementary.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, terrific school.
I live in Sag Harbor, so I see those kids. I love those kids. So tell me, what is the best thing about working and living in the Hamptons?
I would say the lifestyle out here, you know, being in a beautiful place, a natural place, clean environment. In terms of raising children, I value that very much. And like I said, I am lucky enough to work independently and not have to be in a particular place to run my business. I think that all those things contribute to a really nice life-work balance. And even though it was a bit of a surprise that I ended up here, I'm very grateful that I did.
Where did you grow up?
Well, I was born in New Jersey. My father worked in the oil industry. So when I was 7 years old, we were transferred to the Middle East.
Oh, wow.
And I spent a number of years in the Middle East in places like Libya and Saudi Arabia and Abu Dhabi. And I ended up coming back to the States for boarding school, since there were no viable schools there at the time, and ultimately ended up in New York City, among other places. But I consider New York my home.
What a wonderful experience, though, to have this world view. I've spent some time in the UAE. My sister lived there for a while.
Oh, great. Wow.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, I love it. I love that part of the world. I'm eager to take my children.
Oh,
and,
nice.
Yeah, show them that part of the world.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So tell me about your business and how it came about and what you do.
Well, most of my career was spent as a high school teacher. I taught for about 15 years in California and in Hawaii, actually. And when I left the West Coast, I came back to New York and looked for some teaching jobs in the city, was offered some teaching jobs in the city, but ultimately decided I wanted to try something different. And so I ended up working for a legal recruiting firm in New York City with a very good friend of mine from graduate school. And that just opened up a whole new world of possibilities for me. I really loved being in the business world. I learned a ton. And once I met my husband and moved out here, I started to get a little bit more creative with what my career future looked like. And so I had a lot of friends here who had college-age children who kept asking me to read their college essays or review their applications, and I was spending hours and hours doing this type of work, and I thought, you know, this would be a great business. And really the one thing I missed about teaching was working with students, having that one-on-one time with them. And so this college consulting business that I now operate is just a really nice blend of my background, and I'm really happy and excited to be working in that capacity.
And what are the services you provide for is it high school and college, or just high school?
It's geared toward high school students, really all grades 9 through 12, but most of my clientele, you know, are in the 11th and 12th grade year looking at colleges. Some families do ask for assistance in the younger years to kind of help them with academic planning, with what to do with their summers if the student has a particular interest or not. So I help deliver resources to families if they're looking for that type of thing. But usually by their junior year, they're on that college track and really looking for assistance with finding the right fit colleges, that they want to apply to, and working on their college essays and going through the application process, building their college lists and making sure that those lists are balanced, helping with their college visits, how to communicate both in interviews and just via email with college admissions officers. So it's really about helping the student kind of get to know who they are and what their interests are, and then shepherding them through that process. What
a great service.
Yeah.
And I'm sure parents appreciate the support, and I'm sure the students appreciate not talking to the parents about all this. It's a passion we share, helping people really figure out what they want to do. So what are the conversations like with a teenager around that?
They start off pretty stiff, and obviously just asking a teenager what they want to do is not going to solicit a very, very articulate answer. But I use a lot of self-assessments. One in particular I really like, called U-Science. I have my students take early on in the process, and it's a really great tool because it is a very simple series of brain games that the students take, and it has been developed by psychologists who have years of research available to them, and they link those results to possible majors that they would pursue in college and also to possible careers. So it really is a nice starting point to have that conversation. A lot of that data is linked to the Department of Labor, and it gives projections on what careers they might pursue and how popular those careers might be, how much money they might earn. So it gets them thinking even beyond college. The end game is not just to get into college. It's about pursuing your passion and pursuing a career that's going to make you happy and productive. So I really, that's usually my starting point, is to try to have that conversation about just their genuine interest. What are your aptitudes? What are you good at? And then what are you interested in?
What's the hardest thing about your job?
Time management is difficult, raising 2 young children and sort of having all these surrogate kids on the side. It's really important to me to spend quality time with my students, and sometimes I have a hard time just balancing all that.
Yeah, working moms are my hero.
Yeah.
Heroes. I really appreciate that. And as a freelancer in this business that you have, what is the most rewarding part of the job?
I think at the end of this whole cycle of college admissions, when I have particularly a student who thanks me and I see is truly, truly happy with where they're going and kind of understands that, it's really about what they do when they get there, and feels like they've accomplished something. They've really been in the driver's seat, and is ultimately happy with what's coming down the pike. That's super fulfilling for me. And also the parents. I mean, I get a lot of great feedback from parents, and that's very rewarding as well.
Nice.
Yeah.
So a big part of our workforce right now are people like you, and I call them Lancers, people that are solopreneurs, creating their own business.
Right.
And I know for my readers and other people, figuring out how to market as a freelance worker is often a challenge. So how has that been for you? In a way it's been easy in a small community because you know a lot of people, so that's a really great springboard. I connected with our local libraries. I've given some free lectures. I've connected with our local college counselor in Sag Harbor. Obviously, I'm a very social person. I have a lot of friends, and so getting the word out hasn't been too difficult. I think, marketing beyond the confines of Sag Harbor is a little bit more difficult because, we're a little bit isolated out here. So understanding how to do that has, I think, probably been one of my challenges.
But you can work virtually, just
Yes.
so everyone knows.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I've had students internationally, and I've worked with them over Zoom and Skype, and I have a deep interest in working internationally just because of my background. So I hope to, you know,
Oh, wonderful.
to do a
Wonderful.
little bit more of that as well in the future.
So let's shift over to the Spur.
Okay.
We're in the Spur today.
Yep.
And I'd love to know how you found out about it and what your experience has been here.
I met the founder's wife at a tennis clinic, which is how you meet people out here. And you know, she was telling me what she's very involved as well, and she was telling me what they were doing. I thought it was very interesting and so needed out here. And ultimately, I didn't really pursue it. But then, after working remotely out of my house for quite some time, I realized that I really needed a working space, and then I remembered, the Spur would be a great place to go, and it's been incredibly effective and productive for me, because my kids go to camp in East Hampton in another town, and I have to drive them all the way there, and to drive back home is just such an onerous thing to do in the summertime. And so I work out of the East Hampton space. I drop my kids off, I go to my job, and I spend the day there until they need to be picked up. So it really allows for that kind of flexibility, and I'm very grateful for that.
And there's no kids at the Spur
No,
yet.
there's no kids at the Spur. Just really nice, interesting people. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So you and I have a common interest in helping future leaders be compassionate.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was curious how you use compassion with your students and your parents.
Well, I think it's an absolute necessity in what I do. Given the landscape of college admissions right now, it's, as you know, incredibly competitive, and kids are very stressed out. And it's a shame, because every student I meet with, I think, is exceptional. I mean, I see exceptionality in every single one of them. And so part of my tactic is to act as a cheerleader and to really, try to drill that into them, have them really discover their story, a unique story that they can tell in their application, and one that is truly theirs. So I really am, I spend a lot of time on the front end trying to develop that trust with the students, so that they can feel comfortable in opening up with me about either challenges they've had, or setbacks, or successes, or whatever the case may be. So I do use compassion. It's probably on the front of my mind in every meeting, because I understand how difficult it is for them. I went to an elite boarding school here in the States, and I remember the day that college letters came out, and this was back in the day when there was no internet, and you got a hard copy letter in the mail, and our PO boxes were in this old brick building, and everyone would flood to the building when the letters came out, and people would be ripping open their mailboxes, and the letters would be flying up in the air. Some people were crying, crumbling on the ground, and others were jumping up and down, and it was such a dramatic moment. I remember that, and I just really want to convey the message that their self-worth is not attached to whether one school takes them or not.
It's hard.
It is hard.
It's hard. I think it's
It is
harder
hard.
for them now, because everyone shares it on Facebook, everyone shares
Yeah.
it on the internet.
Yep.
So if you haven't achieved what you thought you were supposed to, there's a lot of depression, as we know, with
Right, with
teenagers. So
yeah.
your work is beautiful. I
Oh,
think
thank
it's
you.
really important. I wish that every teenager could have a you. I think that would be awesome for everyone.
Thank you.
I think it's really important to have an adult that's an advocate, that's not your parent.
True, very true.
How do you take care of yourself while you're taking care of your family and your business? How do you balance compassion with yourself with compassion for others?
I spend a lot of time in the water, or on the water. That's been a big anchor for me here. So as much as I can, I really do try to get outdoors. I mean, that's part of the reason we live here, right? And that's something that I just schedule into my daily calendar. I make sure that I get some activity in that involves the ocean.
Is there anything else you'd like my readers to know about you or your business or the Hamptons or the Spur?
Well,